And once again, I want to say greetings to each and every one of you. Aquaba. Welcome. Welcome to another round of the Conscious Rasta Report here on LIB Radio, LIB TV, here on livinginblack.com. My name is Kedio Wado, aka the Conscious Rasta. Weekday mornings, you and I get together live. We come at you from 9 a.m. Pacific time. That's 12 noon Eastern time, 5 p.m. GMT, and 8 p.m. East African time. We get together with you. And we deal with culture, consciousness, historical perspective, entertainment, economics, education, health, labor, law, politics, religion, family, conflict, future studies, all areas of human interactivity and development. Today's date is Wednesday. It is the 31st day of December. This corresponds to the year 6266 in the Kemetic calendar, 2025, the last day of 2025 in the Western calendar. And also this is the 11th day of the Karast Ma'at Kwanzaa celebration. Kumba is our celebration today. Bear with me while I have a couple of more buttons to push over here. And welcome to the 7th millennium. You have found your family in a peaceful place here on LIB Radio, LIB, and livinginblack.com. Hope you are all in wonderful, wonderful spirits today. And again, I didn't do a graphic for today, but Kumba, let's just real quickly put that on the table. Bear with me. Excuse me, my throat is clearing itself. Kumba, creativity, the active use of our imagination individually and collectively in the service of our divine purpose and in service of our divine people. So I say, Ashe, Ashe, Ashe Yo. Here's what we have on the table for today's presentation. King Leopold's genocide across East Africa and peace in the Congo. Welcome to the Conscious Rasta Report. Today we'll journey into the heart of Africa to examine the DR Congo's perpetual crisis. We'll trace the roots of this conflict back to the 1880s when colonial powers set in motion a devastating chain of events that continues to plague the nation. Join us as we unravel this complex web of history and explore pathways toward a more hopeful, prosperous future for the Congolese people. And that is what we have on the table for today. I have a piece of video I want to share with you all right now about what is happening there. I'm going to add this to the stage. I'm going to mute my microphone. And this video is just going to take about 3 minutes or less. And hopefully you and I and everyone else who's listening will have a better understanding. I'm going to mute my mic, and here we go.
Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Here's 2 main reasons why M23 are fighting there. M23 is led by ethnic Tutsis. They claim to protect Congolese Tutsis from attacks carried out by extremist groups, some of them ethnic Hutus who fled Rwanda after killing hundreds of thousands of Tutsis in the 1994 genocide. UN experts cite evidence showing that Rwanda's defense forces support M23. Rwandan President Kagame denied this, but he's also been vocal about the need to protect Congolese Tutsis.
Those who carried out the genocide are still practicing the ideology of genocide in Eastern Congo.
Ethnic considerations aside, UN experts and DRC leaders say M23 want to control local resources.
DR Congo President Felix Tshisekedi has accused M23 and Rwanda government of illegally exploiting minerals in eastern DR Congo. These regions are rich in gold and coltan, a metal used in the manufacturing of electronic devices, including phones.
Ultimately, despite M23's claims to be protecting Congolese Tutsis, evidence shows they also want to control the local mineral trade, fueling the conflict.
Now, I hope you saw in that video of the most beautiful lands, the Congo, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, that you could ever imagine. Let me say greetings to my listening audience today. For Africa One, Sister Singai, welcome. Hotep, Brother Kidi, and Global LIB family. Habari Gani, Kumba. Habari Gani, what's the word? Kumba is the response. Why are M23 fighting in the DR Congo? Well, this is a wonderfully complex tale, and it's a terribly complex tale. I'm going to do my best today to give you a chronology of the degeneration of the Congo. I did put up a couple of links, and I'm going to hit this link again just in case anybody didn't get it. I think you all did get it. But I'm going to do this tale right. First of all, let's talk about putting it all together, recurrent patterns across 1881 to 2025, and we're in the last hours of 2025. A few recurring patterns link East Africa to the vast Congo Basin, and especially link these patterns to the Congo Basin conflict. Number one, colonial borders. This is a very, very important. Colonial borders and ethnic engineering. I didn't say ethnic cleansing, I said ethnic engineering. Berlin era boundaries and Belgian practices in Rwanda, Urundi, and the Congo fractured communities and hardened identities, especially in the Great Lakes region. Point two, this made the Eastern Congo a repository for cross-border ethnic grievances. Point two, porous borders and rebel sanctuaries. From the early 20th century, labor and military recruitment to post-independence rebel movements, Congo's east regularly serves as a rear base for conflicts originating in Rwanda, Burundi, and Uganda. Now, I don't want you to work too hard at it, but I want you to remember the case in Uganda. There was a military captain, and I can't even remember it, so I'm glad I kind of blocked it out. It's there in the side of my memory. But he was the Lords of Resistance military group. Let me real quickly identify who was head of Lords of Resistance, who was the head of the Lords of Resistance. It was a fanatical group. They're in, and it was there in the Uganda. And bear with me, I have to look this up. Heads of Lords of Resistance. That's not the right one. In Uganda. Let me get this right. It's found an Algerian military leader, but that's not what we're looking for. Who was the head of Lords of Resistance in Uganda? Joseph Kony. That's the one. The heads of the Lord's Resistance Army in Uganda was Joseph Kony. Now, he's operating in the same region as they say. He was actually operating in South Sudan, which is close to the border of Eastern Congo. He is the founder and leader of the LRA, a militant group that gained infamy for its brutal tactics, including the abduction of children to serve as soldiers and sex slaves. Kony came to prominence in the late 1980s and has been the focus of international efforts to capture him, particularly following the viral Kony 2012 campaign. Now, I'm pretty sure he's dead at this point. And this is a very important paragraph. I want to copy this. I want to put this into this report. And Lords of Resistance. This is a very, very important. So next, we talked about the porous borders and rebel sanctuaries. Bear with me. All right. Next, refugee militarization. Now, these borders in the Eastern Congo, there's no fixed borders. The area is much, much too vast to have any kind of real restrictions. They would, if they stationed the entire army along the eastern border, it would still have huge gaps in it. So refugees have constantly moved between these borders of South Sudan, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi. This is very important. Refugee militarization, the Rwandan genocide, and earlier episodes in Rwanda and Burundi generated militarized refugee populations in the Congo. That was where the Rwandan Interahamwe, which is the group that carried out the genocide in 1994, they passed through these porous borders into Eastern Congo, where there were also Rwandese from many generations of Rwandans living in Eastern Congo. This is important. Especially the Hutu and Tutsi linked groups, which became central actors in subsequent wars. Well, the Hutu group, indigenous to, well, actually, no, they are not. Well, I can't. They are indigenous to Rwanda, and the Tutsis are migrants largely. The Tutsis were already there, established for several generations. We'll trace the Tutsis in Eastern Africa back to the Simba Rebellion. I want you to remember that. The Simba Rebellion comes up, very important. Point 4, regional states using Congolese territory and proxies. Rwanda and Uganda, and at times Burundi and others, have repeatedly intervened directly or via proxies to secure borders, neutralize rebels, and access resources, inserting East African strategic conflicts into the Congo Basin. Point 5, resource extraction and war economies. From King Leopold, the Butcher King, from Leopold's rubber regime to contemporary coltan and gold trades, external and regional actors have exploited Congo's resources, often via armed groups, reinforcing the logic that instability can be profitable. And when we're talking about the resources in the Democratic of the Republic of the Congo, they are vast. And the people of the Congolese Basin should be the richest people on earth. Now, clip that. Weak, point 6, weak Congolese state authority in the East. The chronic governance vacuum in eastern Congo has allowed local militias, foreign rebels, and neighboring armies to embed themselves, turning the region into a long-term zone of overlapping sovereignties, a long-term zone of overlapping sovereignties which have never have been glued together. At the so-called Berlin Conference of 1884-1885 was actually originally called the Congo Conference. So now I'm going to do my best to share a detailed chronology of affairs and events across East Africa from 1881 to 2025 that have contributed to the numerous conflicts in the Congo Basin. Here's a structured chronology, 1881 to 2025, focusing on events in East Africa and the Great Lakes that fed into, shaped, or intensified conflicts in the Congo Basin. I will emphasize causal links, not just dates. So let's go into this. The first section of this is entitled 1881 to 1914, the scramble for Africa and the Congo Free State. Let's break this down into segments. 1881 to 1885, the scramble for Africa and the so-called Berlin Conference, which we know as the Congo Conference. What is happening? European powers race to carve up Africa, formalized at the Berlin Conference, 1884-85, where King Leopold II secures recognition of his personal claim over the Congo Free State. And if you have not already, please do read the book called King Leopold's Ghosts. It's a very, very important book, King Leopold, so I'm going to look it up. It's a very important book, and I'm going to look it up on Amazon, King Leopold's Ghost, a story of greed. Bear with me, it's coming in. Of greed, terror, and heroism in colonial Africa. This is such an important book to read. I cannot emphasize this enough. To really, truly understand what has been happening in the Eastern Congo, you got to read King Leopold's Ghost. So I'm going to bookmark that, and I'm going to cut and paste it for our Rumble family, our YouTube family, and encourage each and every one of us. Have you already read it? Let me know. I read it, and it was undeniably quite compelling. King Leopold's Ghost. I'm going to paste this up for my Facebook family. As I'm encouraging everyone to get and to read the book, King Leopold's Ghost. King Leopold makes Adolf Hitler look like an elementary school teacher. When it comes to genocidal practices, none can compare to the brutality of King Leopold, who is credited with killing at least 10 million, some estimates as high as 30 million African people in the Belgian Congo. It was so bad that the Belgian government took it away from him. We'll get to that a little bit later. So we're going to continue. So next dates, 1881 to, we're still in the 1881 to 85 scramble for Africa and the Berlin Conference linked to Congo basic conflicts. Sets the template for arbitrary borders, ethnic fragmentation, and external extraction, laying the structural foundations for future conflict. It splits powerful ethnic groups, the Hutu, Tutsi, Lendu, Alur, etc., splits them across borders and prioritizes resource corridors over social cohesion. The Europeans split it up, created these artificial borders, but they emphasize the resource corridors over social cohesion. That's a very, very important part of the stories that you are still hearing today. Next section, 1885 to 1908, 1885 to 1908, the Congo Free State under Leopold II, who was the murderous Belgian king. What happened? The Congo was ruled as Leopold II's private domain. It includes forced labor, rubber quotas, mutilization if you did not meet your rubber quotas, village burnings, and mass death occur. Estimates run into the millions, tens of millions, maybe as high as 30 million. This system is enforced largely by African soldiers in the force publique, many recruited from East and Central African populations, and these soldiers were recruited largely along ethnic rivalry lines. So you did not recruit Kenya, Rwanda soldiers to oppress Kenya, Rwanda people. But where those people were merged together, meshed together, those soldiers were sent in to put down rebellion on the part of the opposite group. Link normalizes predatory extraction and paramilitary rule in the Congo Basin. And point, it creates long-term demographic trauma and destroys traditional authority structures, leaving a vacuum later filled in by warlords and militias. And it's only natural that the warlords and militias would rise, because you have to have a military faction defending your people. The problem is the Congo is too vast. There's too many different ethnic groups. So you and I can only imagine what it would be like to be in an environment where every ethnic group has its own militia, its own warlords. And with the density of the Congo, you might only have to travel, say, 100, 200 kilometers before you'll run into the next group. Next period, 1885 to 1908. I just read that one. Late 19th century to the early 20th century. Cross-border labor and violence. What's happening? People from Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda, and beyond are recruited or coerced into Congo Free State labor, policing, and military work. Now, the Congo Free State is the private holding of Leopold II. Porters, soldiers, and traders move across the Great Lakes Congo frontier. The link establishes long-standing cross-border networks and grievances. And two, it militarizes population around the eastern Congo frontier, embedding the idea of the Congo as a frontier of opportunity and ruthless exploitation. Next period, 1908, the Congo Free State becomes Belgian Congo. What? International outrage over the atrocities from King Leopold II, forces Belgium to take over from Leopold, creating the Belgian Congo. Exploitation continues, though with more formal colonial administration. The link to today: the colonial rule continues to centralize power and wealth in the West, Kinshasa, Katanga. Power and wealth, Kinshasa, Katanga, marginalizing the eastern periphery bordering East Africa. Structural marginalization that later fuels rebellion. So they have consolidated the power in Kinshasa and Katanga region. The Eastern Congo, which should never have been given to King Leopold, is now pretty much wide open. We can see that still going on. We have yet to get to the Simba Rebellion. I'm going to talk about that. But we are 1914 to 1945. The world wars, colonial reshaping, and ethnic engineering. Here's the period 1914. I don't know what I was saying. 1914 through 1918. World War I in East and Central Africa. German East Africa. Again, this is when the Germans came out of the Berlin Conference with vast holdings in Africa. Future Tanzania, Rwanda, and Burundi. German East Africa. Tanzania, Rwanda, and Burundi. Fights allied forces, including Belgian Congo troops. Belgian forces occupy Rwanda and Burundi from the west via the Congo. So during World War II or World War I, the East Africans took advantage of the conflict in Europe to fight the Belgian Congo troops. Belgian forces occupy Rwanda and Burundi from the west via Congo. The link to today deepens military linkages between the Congo and the Great Lakes and sets the stage for Belgian control of Rwanda and Burundi, where colonial ethnic policies later have direct spillover into the Congo's east. Now again, Belgium is now in control of Rwanda and Burundi. Why? Because they got rid of the Germans. And they took the German African colonies. Very important. 1916 to 1923. The Belgian occupation of Rwanda and Burundi and the mandate. Belgium administers Rwanda and Burundi first as occupied former German colonial territory, then as a League of Nations mandates Rwanda and Urundi. The link to today includes rigid ethnic classification. That's when you see the Hutsis, the Hutu, the Tutsis, and the Twa ethnic identities emerge, and identity cards, politicizing identities that later drive genocidal violence and cross-border militias that enter Eastern Congo. Anybody out there in the audience, are you here today? Are you talking to me? Let's just do a real quick check on you, our listening audience. I hope you find this to be interesting and fascinating. I did a lot of work putting together this chronology. I'm going to speed it up a little bit, but we're doing okay. We're not doing too bad. It is a very complex story, and we're doing the best we can. So we are up to, I want to repeat that, from 1916 to 1923, the Belgian occupation of Rwanda, Burundi introduces rigid ethnic classification, Hutu, Tutsi, and Twa, and identity cards, politicizing identities that later drive genocidal violence and cross-border militias that enter eastern Congo. And the Twa are also established across this entire basin. These are the so-called pygmies. It's a derogatory term. But the Twa, these beautiful people who are said to be God's people, worshipped in ancient Kemet. Now these beautiful people are caught up in this conflict created by the European division of Africa, carving up of Africa, 1920s through the 1940s. Colonial migration into eastern Congo. The Belgian authorities encourage or compel migration from Rwanda, Burundi, and other East African territories into Kivu. Example given the Banya Rwanda migrations for plantation and mining labor. Encourage or compel migration for mining labor and plantation labor. The link, it seeds long-term land and citizenship disputes in North and South Kivu, pitting indigenous, quote-unquote, Congolese communities against the Kenya, Rwanda-speaking migrants and their descendants, one of the core fault lines in later wars. Now we're getting close to the Simba Rebellion. World War II era, strategic and economic mobilization, the Congo's minerals, copper, uranium, etc., and East African ports and routes become critical for the Allied war effort. The link to today reinforces Congo's role as strategic resource hub under external control, legitimizing foreign intervention narratives that persist into the post-colonial period. Post-colonial intervention narratives. It is what it is. I hope someone will join the conversation today because this is weighing very, very heavily on my mind. I can't stand it. I can't stand it. I can't stand it. Not only am I fed up reading this complex narrative, but also, I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of fed up that my audience just does not respond. We're going to keep going. From 1945 to 1960, decolonization and the Congo crisis. Focusing on the late 40s and 50s, rising nationalism in the Congo and the Great Lakes. Anti-colonial movements grow across the Belgian Congo, Rwanda, Burundi, and British East Africa. Yeah, the British are still there at this point. In the 1940s and 1950s, the British colonials are still there. In Kenya, Uganda, and Tanganyika, which is now Tanzania after uniting with Zanzibar and forming a federated state. But Tanganyika also was former German colony, and the British took it away. The link creates new political elites who will later use ethnic and regional mobilization to capture the state and, in the Congo's east, mobilize armed groups. 1959 to 1962, Rwandan, quote, social revolution, unquote, and refugees into the Congo. Anti-Tutsi violence and revolution in Rwanda. Thousands of Tutsis flee a genocide, 1959. Flee into neighboring states, including eastern Congo. The link establishes a refugee presence in Kivu that becomes militarized over time and interacts with Congolese ethnic politics and land conflicts. It sets up a pattern. Whenever Rwanda, Burundi destabilize armed groups and refugees move into the Congo basin. I do see For Africa One with a comment. Thank you, my beloved sister. I'm listening closely but scrambling my brain. I have struggled for the longest time to overstand. And this complex, very complex chronology I've been working at for, you can imagine, it's some time. And that's why it's good that we break it up into these time periods. So going forward, because I'm reading it for about the fourth or fifth time, and I'm just starting to see how all of this fits. But, I've been studying the Congo for 20 years and more. 1960, the Congo's independence and the Congo crisis. What happens? Congo becomes independent, June 1960. Rapidly breaks down. The army mutinies. Katanga and South Kasai secede. The UN intervenes. Cold War meddlings. And the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. Now, I just want to real quickly talk about the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, because this leads directly to the Simba Rebellion. Patrice Lumumba was undeniably a darling of the African independence movements. But in retrospect, Patrice Lumumba moved too quickly. It probably wasn't too quickly in his mind, because he had been fighting for the independence of the Democratic Republic of the Congo for some time. His assassination was organized by the CIA, who used a goodwill mission of the UN to Africa, featuring Louis Armstrong. Beloved Louis Armstrong, loved all over the world, went on a peace goodwill trip to Congo. And in his camp was Frank Carlucci. Colin Powell once called Frank Carlucci his mentor and his best friend, but Frank Carlucci is the one who coordinated the assassination and the destruction of Patrice Lumumba's body. Frank Carlucci. It's a complicated story, and I'll do the best I can to fill in the gaps. So, the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, link early fragmentation and external intervention, normalizes the idea that the Congo's internal political crises can justify foreign intervention. And let me just put in a note, coordinated by the CIA and Frank Carlucci. We're talking about the assassination. So, early fragmentation and external intervention normalize the idea that Congo's internal political crises can justify foreign intervention. At this point, the United States is in the mix. Eastern provinces remain weakly integrated, making them susceptible to influence from neighboring East African states. Now, at this particular point, Kenya has had the Mau Mau Revolution, which did not overthrow the British, but they did show the British that military maintenance of its colonial empire would be increasingly difficult, and the British got out without getting out. They withdrew their military control, released the prisoners from the rebellion, and then they set up the British Commonwealth, by which many former British colonial states still remain under monarchical rule. So, the Congo's independence and crises, eastern provinces remain weakly integrated, making them susceptible to influence from neighboring East African states. 1965 to 1960 to 1965. This becomes a critical element, this critical time period to understand what we're witnessing today. What happened? Various rebellions, the Simba rebellions, etc., emerge. Neighboring states, some newly independent, are involved as staging grounds or arms channels. The link to today, it embeds patterns of cross-border insurgency. Rebels move through East African territories. Foreign fighters and advisors begin to appear, and many of these foreign fighters and advisors we might call mercenaries. They begin to appear. It creates a precedent for proxy use of Congolese territory in wider regional struggles. And then that brings us to the Simba Rebellion. And I'm going to put this up as a link for my viewing and listening audience. I hope you are paying close attention. Let me see, how many do we have? I can't tell how many are listening. 3 people watching us on YouTube. That's sad. That's sad. 5 people on Rumble. I see you in the house. For Africa 1, she writes, oops, fat finger moment. Neither can I stand it. Does King Leopold's ghost clarify the complex relationships? Yeah. But it's just a fragment of the necessary inputs. The fragmentation of the Eastern Congo at the Congo Conference of 1884 and 85 really sows the seeds for all of this. But then King Leopold's adding the brutality into it. The use of the Congo as just a place to extract resources with no concern for its people. I mean, there were so many things that King Leopold's inserted. I would highly recommend read the book, because as complex as this discussion is, the book is much, much more complex. But it doesn't bring you up to date. I'm going to do the best I can to bring you up to date today. And I can't stand it. Let's continue. And let me just put up this link to Simba Rebellion. And we're going to go into that right now. The Simba Rebellion. I'm going to put that up onto my... I'm on Wikipedia. The Simba Rebellion, also known as the Oriental Revolt, was a regional uprising which took place in the Democratic Republic of the Congo between 1963 and 1965 in the wider context of the Congo crisis and the Cold War. The rebellion, located in the east of the country, was led by the followers of Patrice Lumumba, who had been ousted from power in 1960 by Joseph Kasavubu and Joseph Desiré Mobutu, and subsequently killed in January 1961 in Katanga. The rebellion was contemporaneous with the Kwilu Rebellion, led by fellow Lumumbist Pierre Mulele in central Congo. Now that's all very important. Let me copy, cut, and paste that. Bear with me. Come on, just do it. I'm going to copy, cut, and paste that into my report and continue. The Simba rebels were initially successful and captured much of eastern Congo, proclaiming a People's Republic at Stanleyville. However, the insurgency suffered from a lack of organization and coherence, as well as tensions between the rebel leadership and its international allies of the Eastern Bloc. When the Congolese government launched a number of major counter-offensive from late 1964, spearheaded by battle-hardened mercenaries and backed by Western powers, including the United States, CIA, the rebels suffered several major defeats and disintegrated. By November 1965, the Simba Rebellion was effectively defeated. The holdouts of the rebels continued their insurgency until the 1990s. So this time when Joseph Mobutu comes to power as part of putting down the Simba Rebellion and the Mulele Rebellion, then, the Kwilu Rebellion, not the Mulele, Kwilu, then that takes us into the era of 1965 through 1990. Mobutu, regional authoritarianism, and rebel incubation. Let's begin with 1965, Mobutu's coup and the creation of Zaire. Mobutu Sese Seko seized his power, renaming the country Zaire in 1971. He builds a centralized authoritarian patronage state backed by Western powers. In other words, he becomes a dictator backed by CIA and NATO powers. The link to today, Eastern Congo remains neglected, underdeveloped, and poorly governed. This periphery center imbalance helps later warlords and foreign states justify intervention to, quote, protect their communities, unquote, or access resources. I would say to protect their and access resources, because the resources are necessary. The resources are necessary to preserve the people. The people are living in abject poverty. So they're going to have to find a way to pay the bills. And that is through the wildcat mining. The 1960s through 1970s, East African liberation movements using Congolese territory. Various movements, Ugandan exiles, Sudanese rebels, and others, use Eastern Congo as refuge or rear base. How does this link to today? This normalizes the use of the Congo Basin, especially its eastern forests and mountains, as a sanctuary for East African insurgencies. Next point, Zaire's weak border control creates a porous security environment that persists into the post-Cold War era. Now, again, as so much of this is happening from World War II on, the Cold War is happening in the background. So increasingly, you're seeing U.S. intervention into the Congo. At this point, it's called Zaire. And their boy in charge is Joseph Mobutu. Joseph Desiré Mobutu. Let's continue. Still quite a bit to go. It speeds up. We're seeing a lot of changes. 1972, 1973, 1981, shifting citizenship laws in Zaire. Mobutu's regime alternately grants and then restricts citizenship for Kenya-Rwanda speaking populations, the Banya-Rwanda and the Banya-Mulenge in the Kivu province. The link to today, this deepens local tensions around land belonging and political representation in Eastern Congo, or Eastern Zaire. And it sets up later conflicts where neighboring Rwanda claims to be defending Kenya-Rwanda speakers inside the Congo. And they're right. Again, there's Kenya-Rwanda, Banya-Rwanda, and Banya-Mulenge. These are nations. These are kingdoms. Next, Idi Amin, Uganda, 1971 to 1979, and subsequent Ugandan conflicts. Uganda cycles through coups and civil wars. Amin, then Obote, then Museveni's in national resistance movement. Fighters cross into and out of neighboring states, including Zaire. The link to today, the habit of rebel safe havens and arms flows through eastern Zaire, becomes entrenched. Future groups like the Allied Democratic Forces, ADF, originate in Uganda, but embed themselves inside the Congolese forests. 1970s through 1980s. Economic collapse and Zaireanization, quote unquote. Mobutu's economic policies and corruption cause economic decay. His Zaireanization of foreign-owned enterprises collapses productive capacity. The link to today, state retrenchment in the periphery, especially the eastern Zaire, forces local populations and elites to self-arm and to organize. Militias and self-defense groups proliferate, ready to be co-opted by future regional wars. 1990 to 2003. The Rwanda Genocide and the Congo Wars. 1990 to 1994, Rwanda Civil War and Genocide. The Rwanda Patriotic Front, RPF, invades Rwanda from Uganda in 1990. In 1994, the genocide against the Tutsi and massacres of moderate Hutu occur. Around 800,000 are killed in 100 days. My friend Eric Kabera made a wonderful film about 100 days. 800,000 people are killed. That's averaging 8,000 people a day. And Bill Clinton's White House would not allow the word genocide to be used because that triggered a U.S. response reaction, where in actuality, it appears that they really wanted it to keep on going. After the RPF, Rwanda Patriotic Front victory, over 1 million Hutu, including ex-FAR Rwandan army and Interahamwe militias, flee into eastern Zaire. The Interahamwe, that's the group, the militant group that carried out much of the genocide, not only against the Tutsis, or those identified by Tutsi. Now they no longer identify in Rwanda by tribal names, but they also include moderate Hutsis who did not want to participate. So they flee, millions flee into eastern Uganda, Zaire. The link, eastern Zaire's refugee camps became militarized bases for attacks into Rwanda. And there were not only refugee camps in eastern Zaire, but also in western Uganda as well. Rwanda and later Uganda cite these cross-border threats as core reasons to intervene in the Congo, directly tying East Africa's conflicts to Congo Basin wars. 1994 to 1996, militarized refugee camps and FDLR formation. Former Rwandan army and militias reorganized in camps in Kivu. The precursor to the FDLR, Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda, emerges. Now again, this is a group backed by Belgium. FDLR. So Belgium is trying to get back in there. Link creates a persistent armed Hutu presence in eastern Congo. One of the main justifications for Rwanda military operations on Congolese soil. You may remember a film called Hotel Rwanda. The film depicted the life of, I believe his name was Paul Rusesabagina. That was another syllable there. What was his name? Let me get his name real quickly. Paul. I'm looking at Hotel Rwanda film. It's Hollywood. And we have to understand Hollywood is not a friend to what's going on there. Hotel Rwanda, I'm looking at it, talks about Paul Rusesabagina, and talks about his wife Tatiana. Hotel Rwanda, a 2004 biographical historical drama written and directed by Terry George. I met Paul Rusesabagina, and I didn't meet his wife, but I did meet him at a college in New Mexico. He was on tour. He was being sponsored. Now he sits in a prison in Rwanda. He's in prison now because the Belgians attempted to use him to run for president to retake what they missed, having access to all of that wealth in eastern Congo Basin. I'm going to kind of leave it there because I have a story to tell about Rusesabagina, that you would have to, Rusesabagina, that's his name. You would have to be in a room with me before I'll tell this story. So, Rwanda, militarized camps, FDLR formation, this creates a persistent armed Hutu presence in eastern Congo. One of the main justifications for Rwanda military operations on Congolese soil. Local Congolese communities are caught between the FDLR, Rwandan forces, and Congolese militias, driving cycles of revenge and displacement. 1996 to 1997, the First Congo War. Rwanda and Uganda back Laurent Desire Kabila's AFDL rebellion to overthrow Mobutu. Troops and rebels advance from eastern Zaire across the country. Mobutu falls in 1997, and the country becomes the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the DRC. Establishes a new pattern of regime change engineered from Congo's eastern borderlands, with East African states as kingmakers. Leaves behind Rwanda and Uganda military structures and armed militias embedded in the eastern Congo Basin. Now, this is very important because Mobutu, puppet of the CIA, has been in power since 1965 That's the Simba Rebellion. He came to power by putting down the Simba Rebellion using mercenaries from Belgium, South Africa, and the United States. Now, at that time, South Africa was still white minority rule, apartheid. So Mobutu comes in power on the basis of these mercenaries. And now, 20 years later, specifically 32 years later, Mobutu is removed as a ruthless dictator of the Congo. From 1965 to 1997, Mobutu is there. 1998 to 2003, the Second Congolese War, Africa's World War. After Kabila turns against his former allies, Rwanda and Uganda back new rebellions, the RCD, the MLC, etc., while Angola, Zimbabwe, Namibia, and others back Kinshasa. Multiple fronts run across the country. The death toll estimates range into the millions, including those from disease and starvation. To link to today, Eastern DRC, North and South Kivu, and Ituri province becomes the epicenter of regional proxy warfare. Rwanda, Ugandan, Burundian, and other forces engage in direct fighting. Resource extraction, gold, coltan, timber, and sponsorship of local militias. What a mess. The fragmentation of armed groups during and after the World War, the Second Congolese War, leads to enduring conflict economies in the Congo Basin. 1999 to 2003, the Ituri conflict and local war economies. In northeastern Congo, Ituri province, Hema-Lendu violence intensifies, supported or manipulated by Ugandan and other external actors. The link shows how regional militaries leverage ethnic tensions for control of gold and timber. Ituri becomes a template for localized, resource-driven wars that outlive formal regional agreements. 2002 to 2003 Sun City and Pretoria peace agreements. Withdrawal of foreign troops. Formal peace accords lead to a transitional government. Rwanda and Uganda officially withdraw many troops. A UN mission, MONUC, later MONUSCO, is deployed. MONUSCO is deployed, UN peacekeepers. Link, while state-to-state violence and war declines, the security vacuum is filled by splinter groups, ex-proxies, and new militias, including the UN militias, which actually do engage in numerous atrocities in the Eastern Congo. Regional actors shift from open intervention to covert support of armed groups, particularly in Eastern Congo. We got a little bit more, and we had a little bit more. Post 2003 this is 2003 to 2010. Persistent insurgencies and regional security entanglements. Post 2003, the FDLR are entrenched in the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. Again, the Force for the Democratic Liberation of Rwanda consolidates itself in North and South Kivu engaging in predation attacks on civilians and occasional cross-border threats to Rwanda. Link that serves as a continual justification for Rwanda's direct and indirect involvement in Eastern Congo. Point, it forces Kinshasa and the UN to launch operations that sometimes push violence into new areas, creating further displacement. 2004 to 2009, the CNDP insurgency, Laurent Nkunda, and Rwandan interests. The CNDP, led by Laurent Nkunda, a Congolese Tutsi, fights the Congolese army in North Kivu and claims to protect Tutsi communities from the FDLR and other threats. Rwanda is widely accused of backing CNDP. The link, it presents a continuation of Rwanda's influence through Congolese proxies, which again, I remind you, the Rwanda influence goes back to the 1880s. And it deepens tensions between Kinshasa and Kigali, and between local communities, Hutu, Hunde, Nande, Hima, Tutsi, Banya, Mulenge, etc. That's the effect of the division of Africa long before King Leopold. The mid-2000s, the ADF embeds in Eastern Congo. The Allied Democratic Forces, ADF, originally a Ugandan rebel group, relocates its core operations into Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, mainly in Beni and Ituri forests, conducting attacks on Congolese civilians and remaining a threat to Uganda. This adds another East Africa origin armed group to the Congo Basin's conflict ecosystem. And it provides Uganda with ongoing security rationale for cross-border operations or joint missions in the DRC. 2006 and 2007 Congolese elections and contested legitimacy. Elections bring Joseph Kabila to the presidency and later re-election, but both are marred by allegations of fraud and weak state legitimacy. The weak central authority demonstrates efforts to demobilize militias or regulate resource extraction, leaving space for regional actors and local warlords to operate. 2011 through 2020, M23, ADF resurgence, and the new regional interventions. 2012-2013 M23 rebellion. Former CNDP elements mutiny, bringing forth M23. They briefly take Goma in 2012. UN reports accuse Rwanda and, to a lesser extent, Uganda of supporting M23, which they deny. This reinforces the pattern of East African states influencing Congolese armed groups to secure security and economic interests. It demonstrates how unresolved issue from CNDP integration, citizenship disputes, and cross-border Tutsi-Hutu politics continue to spark new wars. We're near the end. Got 12 more years of this to go. 2013. Intervention Brigade and partial M23 defeat. The UN creates an intervention brigade mandated to conduct offensive operations against M23 and other groups. M23 is militarily weakened and many members flee to Rwanda and Uganda. This temporarily reduces one front of conflict, but fighters later re-emerge, and the root causes, land, citizenship, regional rivalry, remain intact. The mid-2010s, the ADF escalates attacks, growing jihadist framing. The ADF attacks intensify in the Beni region. Later, the group is linked controversially and unevenly to global jihadist movements. Uganda and the Democratic Republic of the Congo highlight these links to justify stronger security operation, which means once that label of jihadist uprising, rebellion is put on the country, that means the CIA comes in with their drone operations. From my understanding, just today, the last day of 2025, December 31st, the CIA engaged in a drone attack on Venezuela. (2015 to 2018), political crises in the DRC, Kabila term extensions. Laurent Kabila delays elections beyond his constitutional term, prompting protests and repression. This distracts central authorities from serious security sector reform in the East. Armed groups use the vacuum and uncertainty to expand control, sometimes with quiet support from neighboring states or local elites. And this is when Joseph Kabila is in, and what I didn't see was, and I'm looking for the assassination of Laurent Kabila. Here, let me just real quickly, since I'm on Wikipedia, assassination of Laurent Kabila. And I misspelled it. Assassination of Kabila, Laurent, L-A-U. I think that's how I spell his name. And real quickly, let me just put this up in a AI search. It doesn't, Wikipedia respects spelling, but AI is more flexible. So here we found it on Wikipedia. Laurent Desire Kabila, the president of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, was assassinated in his office inside his official residence at the Palais des Marbre, Kinshasa, on 16th January 2001. So this is much earlier in our timeline. The assassination who killed him was his 18-year-old bodyguard, Rashidi Mizele, who has also been previously identified as Rashidi Kasereka. Mizele was later shot dead. It was believed that some former child soldiers were part of this plan. Kabila was responsible for the death of many Kodogos in the time leading up to his assassination. The day before his assassination, Kabila had overseen the execution of 47 Kodogos who were accused of plotting to kill him. Kabila's military standing had deteriorated and his life was in jeopardy. In November 2000, Kabila thought he had discovered a plot against him and had arrested, tormented, and killed soldiers loyal to Commandante Anselme Masao Nindaga, who had days earlier made a speech at a reunion for 1,200 Kodogos in Kinshasa. The conspiracy to murder Kabila began in early January 2001 when a group of Kodogos traveled to Brazzaville and prepared Operation Mbongo Zero. The conspiracy scheme, known as Operation Mbongo Zero, outlined how they would infiltrate important buildings in the capital, such as the Marble Palace. Mbongo means bull in Swahili and money in Lingala. After gaining access to the palace, the perpetrators would approach the president with a revolver and fire at him. This group of perpetrators were Kadogos who had fought with Kabila against Mobutu Sese Seko's military dictatorship. Kasereka was reported to have said, "I will kill him." And then it goes on to talk about the assassination again on January 16, 2001. And there is a documentary film you can find on YouTube, and it talks about the Kodoko assassination of Laurent Kabila. So that takes place January 16, 2001. Let me just real quickly put this into my report. It says on January 16, the assassin entered the president's office as Kabila was discussing with an economic advisor, Emile Mota, after about a forthcoming summit meeting with France, which he hoped would protect his presidency of the Congo. The assassination bent over Kabila, and when the president leans toward him, assuming the bodyguard wanted to speak to him, pulled out a revolver and shot the president 4 times in the abdomen. The assassin escaped the palace with other conspirators amidst gunfire. So let me just put this in here. 2001. And I don't know if I can find a place to insert it. Let me find Kabila's name and insert it there. I'll just put this in here 1 sec. Okay, let's continue. Going forward, we're almost at the end. 2023 to 2025. Persistent low, I missed this, mid to early 20s, global demand for cobalt, coltan, which stands for columbite, tantalite, gold, and other minerals intensifies. Eastern DRC remains a key source of these minerals. Companies and local power brokers exploit weak governance. Armed groups and sectors of neighboring elites finance themselves through illicit or semi-illicit extraction. Regional actors benefit from continued instability. Climate and forest conservation initiatives in the Congo Basin sometimes clash with local livelihoods and militia economies, adding another layer of contested control. Yeah, now we have standing in this crazy is the conservationists, I will call them. We're going to have a guest on whose book exploits the conservation groups as largely a fraud in the region. He's going to be on with us from Kenya, and I think he's from Kenya. Yeah, and he's got a very important book for you and I to understand. He'll be with us later in January. Persistent low and medium intensity conflict. Despite peace talks, Donald Trump's so-called Nobel Prize, persistent ceasefires, and diplomatic efforts, fighting continues among M23, FDLR, Forces for the Democratic Liberation of Rwanda, remnants, my groups, not Mau, but my groups, ADF, and others, alongside Congolese and foreign forces. This confirms that regional security dynamics, such as Rwanda and Uganda competition, internal crises in Burundi, Uganda's interests, East African communities' military posture, remain deeply entangled with Congo Basin conflicts. The Congo Basin continues to function as a geographic and political buffer and battleground for East African rivalries, refugee flows, and resource struggles. The solutions will come from outside the African continent. What is embedded in the African continent is just this long, long record of conflict. I propose that the solutions will ultimately be Pan-African. Number one, from the US and UK, which are among the richest diaspora Africans around the planet, we need a financial intervention force. The first stage of a financial intervention force should be to reinforce the African Union, make the African Union a much stronger governance, much more respectable, much stronger. We need to triple the funding of the African Union. The last time I checked, the African Union was funded at a tune of about $700 billion a year. No, $700 million a year, not billion. Number two, we need to go into the Congo and create enterprise on such a vast scale as to make the Congolese people wealthy. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be quick. It may take to 2020 to 2050 to resolve the complex situation that I've described today. But we need to do this. Now, I have a great understanding of what's happening in the Congo. I do know there is another group, Friends of the Congo. I've been in contact with them, that is established. Personally, I think that we should ourselves put tens of millions of dollars behind the Friends of the Congo. Maybe hire professionals, full-time professionals, to sit in a research think tank with extensions all across the eastern Congo, the Congo Basin. There is the IGAD organization. And here, I'm going to do this real quick. I'm going to pull up a search engine, perplexity.ai, and how can diaspora Africans solve the complex of problems in the DRC and bring lasting peace. Let's see what this can come up with. Now, I know I can have a longer conversation with Perplexity on this, but a short conversation will be very helpful. Diaspora Africa can help address the DRC's crises by organizing as a strategic, well-coordinated, quote, third force that supports local peace processes, constrains external predation, and builds resilient institutions and livelihoods over decades, not election cycles. I completely agree. That's exactly what I was trying to struggle to say. Now, at this point, Perplexity has learned my personality. You maybe see some of the words reflected in here. This requires shifting from charity and ad hoc activism to long-term disciplined Pan-African peace building, economic reconstruction, and political education that is explicitly led by Congolese on the ground. I completely agree. And we do know the Congolese on the ground. Understanding the DRC's problem cluster. Lasting peace requires the DRC as an interconnected system, not just ethnic conflict or resource curse, quote unquote. Key structural drivers include political weak, contested state authority, armed groups embedded in local economies, regional interference from neighboring states and external continental continental powers, extra continental powers, meaning CIA, NATO, etc., and the French and the Belgians. Economic conflict minerals, coltan, cobalt, gold, 3T, financing militias, predatory concession contracts, massive youth unemployment, dependence on raw exports, social, deep trauma and displacement, land disputes, gender-based violence, erosion of customary conflict resolution structures, and regional, international, Great Lakes regional rivalries. External corporations and security services exploiting insecurity to secure minerals cheaply. Any diaspora strategy must work on several of these layers simultaneously rather than chasing single issue fixes. You're absolutely right. Core roles for the African diaspora. Research on African and Congolese diasporas show they can be powerful either for escalation, funding armed groups, or for peace, mediation, advocacy, institution building. The key is disciplined organization and alignment with Congolese civil society. Number one, act as a peace and mediation support network. Point two, reorient the money flows away from war. Point three, build institutional muscle, not just projects. It will require political education and narrative warfare. Concrete steps for diaspora Africans. I'm going to go through this and then I'm going to wrap it up for today. To move from concept to practice, diaspora communities can take sequenced steps that build power over time. The first step, internal discipline first. Create Pan-African but Congo-centered umbrella platforms that unify fragmented diaspora associations under shared principles, non-support to armed groups, respect for Congolese grassroots leadership, gender equity, and transparency. Develop codes of conduct and vetting so diaspora money and advocacy are not hijacked by war, entrepreneurs, or ethnic chauvinists. Point two, strategic alliances. Formalize partnerships with serious Congolese NGOs, churches, women's movements, and youth groups. Treat them as principals, not subcontractors. Engage the African Union, regional organizations, and sympathetic states to institutionalize diaspora participation in official peace and reconstruction frameworks for the DRC. Long-term, long-horizon investment. Prioritize sectors where peace dividends are visible and fast. Local food production, health, education, solar energy, and digital connectivity with clear anti-corruption safeguards. Support trauma healing and psychosocial programs for survivors of war and gender-based violence, recognizing that untreated trauma fuels cycles of revenge and militia recruitment. Diaspora Africans cannot, quote, solve the DRC from abroad, but they can decisively tilt the balance toward peace by aligning money, knowledge, and narrative in service of Congolese transformation over decades. And I'm going to copy, cut, and paste all of that. And there was parts of it I didn't read because it was just so extensive. But This is how you and I can get ourselves involved and become participants in what is being done in and for the DRC. I'm going to take a moment here on the last day of the year and remind you what we are doing, why we are here. Today, we talked about Pan-African sovereignty and sustainable development. Africa's story is being rewritten by and for Africans. And we are honored at LIB Radio, honored to be a part of that narrative. This December, as we celebrate another year of amplifying Pan-African voices, challenging neo-colonial frameworks, and exploring sustainable development pathways, we are calling on our community to ensure this critical work continues. Mainstream media consistently misrepresents Africa, focusing on poverty and conflict while ignoring the innovation, resilience, and self-determination. Our podcast exists to counter these narratives by centering African perspectives on sovereignty, economic independence, and sustainable development that works for all African people, not for foreign investors. We featured conversations on land rights today, land rights, indigenous knowledge systems, regional integration, renewable energy transitions, and economic models that prioritize people over profits. We've explored how African nations are navigating global power dynamics, building South-South cooperation, and reclaiming their resources and narratives. This work matters because representation matters, and authentic voices must be heard. Your donation directly supports our ability at LIB Radio to connect with activists, scholars, entrepreneurs, and community leaders across the continent and diaspora. It helps us cover stories ignored by mainstream outlets and platform solutions emerged from African communities ourselves. We're not asking for charity. We're asking for investment in a movement and a media towards genuine African-centered solidarity and sustainable futures. This holiday season, as we go to close it out, consider the value of perspectives that challenge Western-centric development models, that challenges Western-centered development models, celebrates African innovation, and envisions futures built on self-determination. Whether you give $15, $40, or $75, your contribution amplifies voices that deserve platforms and support analysis that mainstream media simply will not be providing. Help us reach our December fundraising goal. We can expand our African-centered network, invest in on-the-ground reporting, and continue building bridges across the diaspora. Every donation strengthens our collective power to tell our own stories and shape our own destinies. Together, we're not just documenting Africa's rise, we are directly participating in it. So I'm going to ask you, will you go to libradio.com, HTTP, go to LIB Radio, scroll to the bottom of the front page, and make a donation. Make a donation. I see a couple of comments. I'm going to get to the comments here as I close the program. But if you are motivated to go and make a donation, and I see you in the house, Flying Guillotine, If you do make a donation, we can take charge. Oh, Flying Guillotine asks, Kitty Salute, what year is it in Cometian calendar? 62, 66. 62, 66 KMT time. The New Year's is at the end of July. That's real important. So we can make a difference. That's the point I'm making. We can make a big difference. We can do it from where we are. If we are in the diaspora and we make the decision that our input to the Congo is very important, then that input should be as important as we regard ourselves to be. I remind our listening audience, Africans in America are expected to spend by tonight $1.93 trillion in consumption, while 3,000,006 black-owned businesses will be producing slightly over $210 billion in goods and services. We produce $210 billion while we spend $1.93 trillion. So we need the Congo. We need the Congo to give us something to spend our money on. A couple of comments as I go to wrap it up. From great to have you in the house today. For Africa One, listening closely but scrambling my brain. I've struggled for the longest time to overstand. Neither can I stand it. That's after I threw my tyrant. Does King Leopold's ghost clarify the complex relationship? Yes and no. King Jason is in the house. Snotball Baba Keating looking younger than me. Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Bob. I'm having a rough day today. I'm looking at myself and I look a little ragged. But thank you. I love those comments. And yesterday, King Jason, yesterday, I surprised myself. I thought I was going to have to cut back on my daily push-ups and just do 600 a day, which is not too bad. 3 sets, 600. Yesterday, I did 3 sets of push-ups, push them out nonstop, 1 set, 400, 300, and 300. That was 1,000 push-ups in 3 sets. That was a good day. And so today I feel really, really strong. I did my morning exercise, my 10 minutes of HIIT, all of that, because I'm in service of a great people, which includes me. For Africa One, do you have optimism that there can be any resolution in the future? Yes, 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 yes. I do have optimism. Why? Because I possess that. I possess the strength and the courage to go in and to do it. Just like I have optimism about my longevity, I plan to live to be 120. So I can go in to the Congo and get it. I can articulate the solution. You can see just how quickly I went to perplexity and then literally input just one comment on perplexity, and it came back with something I could use. Now, I've been speaking with perplexity every day now for about 2 months, and so it's come to understand my personality. It's embedding itself in me and memorizing. This is machine language learning, and so it's memorizing who I am. Sometimes in the response it will even say, well, Kidi Awadu says this. But the thing about it is it's going to take more than it's going to take much more than a single prompt. It's going to take much more than a single prompt in a single AI. I'm going to have to figure out a way, and this is Me thinking about the next prompt. 1 second. I'm going to have to figure out a way to talk with perplexity and convince Africans across the diaspora that investing in the Congo brings immediate and long lasting rewards, but we won't be able to do this as individual investors. I can send money. I do send remittances to Africa. I'm very proud of that fact. But remittances, our collective remittances, make a big, big difference. But if we organize those remittances to the tune of investment development funds, we can get in. We can get in early, get in deep. We can be the engines that rebuild the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Don't wait for Donald Trump to negotiate a development deal, because he will want to turn the Congo into a big playground, but then realize there are too many people already in the way. And that will lead to more King Leopold II behavior. France, Belgium, we can't kick them out, but we've got to displace them, replace them. We can be trusted. I hope so. Remember, Africans in America did support Joseph Mobutu through the U.S. military and the CIA for many, many years. But we can get in there. So if the AU is partially funded by the EU, is there not a conflict of interest here? Yeah. It sure is. You are absolutely right. But what would the AU be without the EU funding it partially? Muammar Gaddafi was a big funder of the EU, was the biggest funder of the AU before America, Barack Obama's White House, disrupted the Libyan leadership and had him assassinated. They may not have ordered the assassination, but they obviously tolerated it because his assassins were not prosecuted. So we owe a big, big, big debt to our African people. Africans across the diaspora, Africans in Britain, Canada, the U.S., across the Caribbean basin. Africans, I do remain optimistic. We can do it, but we got to get busy. King Jason says, wow, I told him about my push-ups. Congratulations on that, Baba. Thank you. I appreciate that. And we're doing the best we can. I'm going to do even better. I don't know if I'm going to do 1,000 push-ups a day. 1,000 push-ups is a little taxing on the body. And I may not have time to do it today. Flying Guillotine, I see you in the house. I have a friend that blames blacks for King Leopold. Your friend is partially right, but it's out of context. Because King Leopold did hire African soldiers, Askaris, for entrenching his rule. And when the Africans were being mutilated for not delivering their latex rubber, what's the word? How much rubber they were expected to deliver, there was probably Africans who wielded the machetes that cut off hands, cut off lips, noses, cut off feet, mutilating their own people. So, yeah, I'm not going to be so dishonest as to disrupt our African behavior or displace our African behavior from what atrocities took place. But it wasn't our African value. We did not begin that. This came from foreign. And when it was done in the name of more resource extraction, that wasn't our value. We didn't get the benefit from those resources. He said, I seen it terrible. And yeah, we cannot ignore that history. Only thing is, those who refuse to learn from history are condemned to seeing that history repeated. So we can do better. We can do better. And on that note, I think what I'm going to do is come back to this central question. How can diaspora Africans solve the complex of problems in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and bring lasting peace? I'm going to tie this one into Friday's program, Making Money Fridays. And I've done it before because we talk about reparations. How many dollars will satisfy our demand for reparations? Well, according to my calculations, you've seen my book, The Repairing. Many of you have read my book called The Repairing. And you know our demand for reparations encompasses, in that book, published in December 2016, $23.57 trillion. $23.57 trillion. And King Jason, the snotball, says we have to stop denying we are Africans first. You're absolutely right. You and I have stopped. Now we're going to do a better job of working together, collaborating together to convince our African American cousins to behave like us. Right now, many of us don't have a pot to piss in, quoting the book title of our brother. Then stop this crazy beefing with every other diaspora group. Yep. Now we have to show some of our African groups that we disapprove of their beefing. The fundamental Black Americans and what was the other diaspora group? I can't remember what they were called. Carvel, I think was the name. I just dismissed the group. But yeah, we got to stop the beefing with them and come to points where we do agree. And then we can do so. We can ask Perplexity how to create this unity. And maybe I'll do so by the next conversation. But yeah, you're right. We're absolutely right. But you and I have got to do a better job of working together. Today is the last day of the fund drive. Buy the book. The book for today, ADOS, African Descendants of Slaves. Thank you so much, King Jason. You are brilliant. You are an extension for Africa One. You are an extension of my brain here on LIB Radio. And I cannot thank you enough for being an extension of my brain. You are an extension of my brain. I am grateful for you. I'm excited, which feeds my optimism. I'm excited about what we did today. I think it came to a wonderful, wonderful understanding of the complexity of what has been going on in the DRC for so long. And it shows how you and I can come to solutions, should we choose to come to solutions. You've been tuned into LIB Radio, LIBGV, and livinginblack.com. We aim to be your favorite. We are here every day, 9 a.m. on the West Coast. That's 12 noon for our East Coast listeners. We are here every day doing the best we can to solve problems with our people, by our people, for our people. So do get involved, get in deep, and do the best we can to come to real conclusions about what is happening for our global family. Peace and prosperity to each and every one of you.